Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, one true on God. Amen. We have come to a close of a season and a beginning of another season. Today the Church is celebrating one of the most important and greatest feasts of the Church, the Feast of the Pentecost. And of course, this great feast this year is overshadowed by the agony the pandemic has cast over all of us. In a way, this feast was celebrated when the disciples also had this kind of fear. They saw Jesus Christ crucified. While they were struggling with the crucifixion and the pain of his death, they also experienced the resurrected Christ in their midst, instructing them further about the faith. And then they also witnessed him ascending into the heaven, and at the end of the time they were awaiting, as per Jesus' instructions as he was ascending. Today we are commemorating that even when the Holy Spirit descended and filled the disciples with the Spirit. And in the Acts we read that when this happened, they were filled with the Holy Spirit, and the Spirit became visible as tongues of fire. And Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, preached. And his sermon or his speech or his exhortation, it said that it is heard by all those who are gathered there in their own tongues. While we see in the Old Testament, when human beings tried to compete with God, tried to create a tower reaching into the heavens so that they thought they will be able to compete with God. We also see that then they became incomprehensible to each other. The language became divided. So in a way we can say the humanity was divided from then onwards. They were not able to understand each other. Even now we experience the lack of understanding between races, communities, and even within friends also. But today we celebrate this feast when the apostles preached, everybody gathered there were hearing the message of Jesus Christ or message of the church in their own language. So the language which was divided was again, in Jesus' message, it becomes one. And also this is the feast, we can also say that where the church, which was still then a Jewish community, a small community of Jews gathered around Jesus, becomes universal. It transcends the barriers of the language that human beings created. Jesus' message becomes universal. So after this we also see the apostles dispersed into the different parts of the world, and the church literally becomes universal. And today we read Jesus' own exhortation, how his disciples should be. The analogy he uses is the vine grower, the vine, and the branches and the fruits the vine provides. Those of us who grew up in Kerala, especially in the central Kerala part, till the cocoa cultivation came into existence there, we were not exposed to any cultivation that has got pruning. Traditionally in that area what we had was coconut and paddy fields. Both do not need any pruning. And then we introduced rubber, which also didn't need any pruning. But only with the arrival of cocoa that we started, or we were exposed to the whole idea of pruning a tree. And now we live in Long Island. If you take a trip to the eastern Long Island, you see different vineyards, where you see, if you go in different seasons, sometimes you see vineyards with full of grapes, and sometimes you see the bare vines, because it is pruned. It's nothing, it looks like shrubs. So now Jesus is using that analogy. Because pruning, as far as the plants are concerned, it's a painful experience. Because branches are trimmed, and the vine grower very carefully inspects each and every branch. And some of the branches, the vine grower will realize it's not worthy to be kept, because he realizes this particular branch, if it is kept on the vine, it only will drain the energy and the resources of the vine, and at the same time will not produce any fruit and only be a hindrance to the other good branches that produces fruits. And then he will look at the healthy branches very carefully and then prune them. If the unhealthy branches are totally cut and removed, the healthy branches also do not escape the pain of pruning. While one is removed, the other one is trimmed properly so that it can bear better fruits. And this is something we have to remember, because Jesus himself is saying that our relationship with Jesus is as a true vine, Jesus being the true vine, and we are the branches. So we have two options. We can have, or we will be able to be a good branch that bears fruit. Even there, the vine grower or the Father will prune us. We might still have to go through painful experiences, whatever it may be. Each of us will have our own ways of being pruned by God. It could be death of the dear ones, a sickness, or different kinds of agonies and pains, or loss of friendship. We can't say what it would be, but there will be. But going through this, as long as we maintain our relationship with, or our connection with that true vine, Jesus Christ, we will still be bearing fruits. And otherwise, we will be chopped off, gathered, and thrown into the fire. And then he also says the vine grower is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit. So the vine grower who prunes also gets glorified, because his vines produces great fruits. So now we have to look into ourselves and see whether we are bearing fruits. And in the concluding part, Jesus is giving a commandment, not a suggestion. He didn't say that I suggest you love or you abide in my love. He very clearly says, you love one another. This is my commandment. He is not expressing an opinion. He is not expressing a suggestion. But he uses that word, commandment. It's an imperative. It is not something we can choose. We cannot love one another, we cannot avoid loving one another and try to be a disciple of Christ. Because once we stop loving one another, we cut that relationship. When that love is missing from us, we become worthy to be gathered and thrown into the fire. And finally, he expresses his own. He's saying that you are my friends, and my love to you is expressed in my own death. There is no greater love than a friend laying down his life for his friends. That is the ultimate love we saw Jesus Christ expressing in the cross. But when the disciples thought his death was the end of it, when they were at a loss, they also experienced Jesus being victorious over death, being resurrected, and being ascended, and promised, and today, on this feast, his promise was fulfilled by the descent of the Holy Spirit. So this is something we have to remember within ourselves. The agonies, the pain, the separation, different kinds of pruning we go through, they only will help us to strengthen that abiding experience we have in Jesus and enjoying his love and enabling us to love more one another so that we will be known as his disciples. May God bless us all. Thank you.